At this point, the show is either dropping some serious hints that Luthen is a Jedi, or it's straight up trolling us, because in the recent episodes of 10 and 11, we got what I think to be subtle clues that point towards Luthen's possible Jedi past. Now, if you haven't watched my original video on Luthen being a Jedi, I highly recommend that you check that out before watching this video, as there are a ton more clues that I managed to pick out over there. So this video will really just be building on top of what I previously mentioned. So again, if you haven't watched it yet, I recommend you check it out before watching this video. Okay, so in the last two episodes of 10 and 11, we got plenty more scenes with Luthen going about his rebel business. In episode 10, we got an epic monologue from Luthen, giving rebel spy Jung a bit of a rundown on how much Luthen has sacrificed.
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space.
And in all fairness, there are a few keywords in there that do fall in line with some Jedi thinking, such as calm, kindness, kinship, inner peace, all of which could be interpreted as a Jedi-like mindset. But there was one particular line that stood out to me.
I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago from which there's only one conclusion.
The fact that Luthen mentions ghost in the same sentence as 15 years ago should ring a ton of alarm bells, because exactly 15 years ago was the exact same time that Order 66 occurred, coinciding with the attack on the Jedi Temple. It just seems like too much of a coincidence that someone like Luthen would recall this specific timing to the loss of a loved one or something close to him. Another interesting moment during this monologue is when Luthen goes on to say,
I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, they set me on a path from which there's no escape.
All of which are the sort of qualities that the Jedi Order would have discouraged. These are very much anti-Jedi behavior, and something that Luthen willingly admits is bad, putting him on a path of no return, almost as if he recognizes that as a Jedi, there would be no chance for redemption after choosing to follow this path. Perhaps hoping that by sacrificing everything that would make him a Jedi, it would bring about a better future for the galaxy. But granted, this particular moment could simply be interpreted as the reflections of an ordinary person. It isn't exactly concrete evidence, but the clues don't stop there. Moving on to episode 11, Luthen pays a second visit to Saw Gerrera, but before he enters the hideout, he gets frisked by the partisans. And as he's being patted down, one of the partisans pulls out this. Which, if I am being honest here, looks a hell of a lot like a lightsaber hilt. It even has the rough outlines and makings of one. The ringed grooves, the slightly bigger pommel, the metal rings in between have clearly been designed to evoke the sense of a lightsaber hilt. The hilt seems to be mostly made out of wood, which is rather rare for a lightsaber. But it's not entirely unheard of, as there were Wookiee Jedis who used the trees on Kashyyyk to make their lightsaber hilt, symbolizing a unique piece of them, something which could also be the same with Luthen if this is indeed a lightsaber hilt. And checking out the reaction of the partisan who examines it, he clearly has no idea what he is holding at all.
Put it down or give it back.
Which indicates that whatever this is no ordinary object. Now, we have actually seen this hilt in action, as it was the hilt used for Luthen's stick, something which we saw back in episode 3. But look at the way Luthen holds it and the length of the stick. All of this seems to echo the visual image of a Jedi wielding a lightsaber. While the hilt that Luthen is holding clearly isn't a lightsaber, it doesn't seem like a coincidence that it was designed to evoke the feeling of one. And of course, given Luthen's position, it doesn't really make sense for him to walk around with a lightsaber in the event that he gets caught. So one possible explanation is that he could decide to decommission his lightsaber and modify it into a stick, allowing him to potentially use it as a weapon without being recognized as a Jedi. And check out how the stick retracts. Well, doesn't that look familiar? Another point to mention in episode 11 was the dogfight between Luthen and the Imperials. One look and you would have to admit that Luthen is a very skilled fighter pilot, possibly due to his force sensitivity. I mean, the guy is piloting the ship and aiming the gun turret at the same time. That is definitely some impressive skill on display. Now, I know a lot of fans have been pointing out that the two lasers that he uses do evoke the image of Darth Maul or twin lightsabers, and I kinda understand where they are coming from. But for me, the biggest clue isn't actually the lasers, but the spin trick that Luthen does.
I'll try spinning, that's a good trick.
So maybe this might be the showrunner's way of cluing us in on Luthen's Jedi past without giving too much away. And if Luthen is indeed a Jedi, it would also give this line a whole lot more meaning.
I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them.
As it would be him using Palpatine's tactics against the Jedi Order to fight against the Empire, and very few people would have knowledge of Palpatine's true nature and past dealings, the sort of information a former Jedi would undoubtedly possess. And so Luthen choosing to use the cloak and dagger as a way to take down the Empire would mirror the way Palpatine took down the Republic and the Jedi Order. If this is indeed the case, it would really be the perfect example of using your enemy's tactics against them. If we're going to talk about Luthen being a Jedi, then we also have to address what a lot of fans have also been saying, which is that the show isn't really about the Jedi or the Force, it's mainly centered on everyday people doing everyday things. And granted, there is some truth in that. And so for that reason, Luthen couldn't possibly be a Jedi because it just wouldn't fit. While this is indeed a strong case for why Luthen couldn't possibly be a Jedi, I would argue that while the show tries to stay away from the Jedi and the Force, I do think that there is a place for it, especially later in Season 2. Assume for a moment that Luthen is/was a Jedi, then what we are seeing throughout Season 1 is that Luthen has since fallen very far from the path of the Jedi. While he might have a Jedi past, the Luthen that we know doesn't adhere to the principles of the Jedi. So from that sense, he isn't a Jedi any longer. And I wouldn't say that there is no place for a Jedi in the show, as Luthen could very well be a former Jedi, but never display any use of his powers simply because he has chosen to abandon that path for another, giving us a rather character-compelling reason as to why Luthen doesn't simply pull out his lightsaber and start hacking. And this idea that a Jedi has chosen not to use their power following a tragic event isn't exactly new. The idea that a past trauma could affect a Jedi so badly that they would reject any usage of the Force has been repeated with Cal Kestis, Obi-Wan, and so on. Now, granted, both of them did eventually regain their connection with the Force, I would go on to say that Luthen not only chose to cut off his connection with the Force due to a traumatic event, but has done so simply because he no longer believes in it. He no longer believes that the Force can help him achieve what he wants to, and so he decides to cut himself off entirely, which might be why we don't ever see him use the Force, at least consciously. Another possibility that I admit might be quite plausible is that Luthen was once in a relationship with a Jedi, and after losing said Jedi during Order 66, decided to embark on a path of revenge, giving greater context to his monologue in Episode 10. And of course, I have to mention that Luthen Rael's name is strangely reminiscent of Dooku's apprentice name, but this video has gone on long enough and I'm going to save that for another video because trust me, there are a lot of juicy details for that theory. So those are the additional clues that I found that might suggest that Luthen is a Jedi or at the very least related to one somehow. Anyways, please let me know what you think in the comments down below, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I am the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.